All right, good afternoon. I'm going to call to order this regular meeting of the Public Safety, Civil Rights, and Emergency Management Committee. Today is February 17th, 2016. I'm Councilmember Blong Yang, Chair of this committee. With me today are Council Members Palmisano, Gordon, and Quincy, and I believe Council President Johnson will be joining us shortly. Councilmember Reich will not be at this meeting. He has city business to attend to. Today on the agenda we have 6 items. 4 of them are consent items and 2 of them are discussion items. And the first 4 items for consent, one is a contract with the University of Minnesota Police Department to provide bomb detection services at TCF Stadium for large-scale events during 2016. The second item is a contract with the University of Minnesota Police Department to provide an extra security and tactical response at TCF Stadium. The third item is setting a public hearing for March 2nd, 2016 on an ordinance amending Title 16, Chapter 423, the Minneapolis Code of Ordinances relating to planning and development small and underutilized business enterprise program, amending the sunset date of the small and underutilized business enterprise program. And item number 4 is setting a public hearing for March 2nd, 2016 on an ordinance amending Title 17, Chapter 427 of the Minneapolis Code of Ordinances relating to streets and sidewalks in general, repealing Section 427.220 entitled Congregating on Streets or Sidewalks. Council members, any questions or anybody want to pull anything out for discussion? All right, seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, the motion carries. The 5th and 6th items are items for discussion. One of the items is an item related to the contract for TASER International for body cams, and the other item is a public safety recap from the Office of Emergency Management. They're 5 and 6, and I'm actually going to get item number 6 done first. So you're up. I know the director is not here today. He couldn't be here, but his assistant director is going to be here. She's going to introduce herself and then give us the presentation real quick, and then we'll take care of the last item, which is the item that all the cameras are here for, I think. So welcome.
Thank you. Let me get this. Hello, so my name is Danielle Williams, and I'm representing the Office of Emergency Management today. I'm the Finance Section Chief, and thank you so much for having us here to speak a little bit about what we do. I'll be presenting a little overview of our 2015 accomplishments and talking a little bit more about what we plan to do in 2016. Start with our vision. OEM promotes a safe and resilient community, a resilient government enterprise serving a resilient Minneapolis city. And we do this in 4 primary mission areas: preparedness, mitigation, response, and recovery. The threats that we face come from 3 areas: man-made intentional acts, technological hazards, and natural hazards. So simply put, terrorism, accidents, and weather. These are some of the tools that we have to do our jobs both collectively and collaboratively as a city. We aren't what most would consider a traditional response entity. Rather, we exist to serve the first responders across the enterprise. And since we know disasters don't adhere to boundaries, across the metropolitan area, serving our partners as well. We maintain a continuous watch, and as things escalate, we activate the Emergency Operations Center, which provides for multi-agency collaboration and support in times of need. The standard to which we are building our program is the NFPA 1600 standard. This is a national best practice, and our goal is to be accreditation eligible by 2019. What that means is that we will have a plan in place, or a program in place rather, that is capable of planning, implementing, training, exercising, and continuously improving to prepare for the situations that are planned events like the Super Bowl or Final Four, or unplanned events like a disaster. We don't wait for disasters to happen, though. We are on call 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. watching for events to unfold, recognizing these early on that they could escalate and outpace our ability as a city to provide those essential services. Some examples on the screen or in your presentation of things that reached that level for us this year was, of course, the 4th Precinct protests. We were able to provide logistical and planning and information support to the police in this effort. And also, just for example, the high pathogen avian influenza was something that we were doing a lot of planning and logistical work for in preparation. Should that have hit our backyard turkey or chicken flocks, which we do have a significant amount in the community, it would have been a logistical nightmare. So we spent a lot of time planning and preparing for that to be able for these, should they escalate to the point where we were needed. All in all, we raised our awareness level 76 times in the year 2015. More than just weather and event watching, however, we spend the collective majority of our time in the areas of preparation areas of prevention, protection, and mitigation. We focus our attention on programs and projects that buy down risk and mitigate consequence across the enterprise. The following are some of the examples of highlights of projects that we accomplished in 2015. These were all an effort working with our partners, of course, police, fire, public works, CPED, property services, public health, to name a few, but also public and private partners across the enterprise and the city. We're conducting internal preparations for the Super Bowl, just like we would any planned activity, but primarily providing support to MPD in their Super Bowl efforts. We created a rapid needs assessment team, and what that really means is in a bad day, these are the folks that go out and give us the operational picture of how big and how bad this is. That feeds information back to us in emergency management, to our first responders, and to our decision makers to get us the information in a timely manner so we know what we're dealing with. We've completed a comprehensive update of the emergency operation plan that will be presented to the council and the mayor later this year. We've completed things like the railroad corridor assessments and skyway projects to better understand our critical infrastructure throughout the enterprise. And we're also restarting the continuity planning effort for the city. So that will be going into 2016. We run a training and exercise program very successfully. So last year we had 5 exercises, and we trained over 440 participants throughout those courses. We've launched a campaign called Ready Camp, which brought personal preparedness to the neighborhoods. We were able to start that late last year and put 60 people through that class. Here's an example of one of our hands-on training activities. Just want to mention our federal grants programs. One of the ways that we're able to create those programs and projects that buy down risk and mitigate consequences is by leveraging federal preparedness grant dollars. Grant dollars must fund efforts that are demonstrated homeland security or emergency management focus. There are a lot of laws and regulations that guide these dollars from both a federal and a state standpoint. So this year, the Office of Emergency Management put together a comprehensive guide for our partners. We work with many groups across the enterprise to be able to best leverage these dollars since they're a huge asset to our city. We created that guidance in order to, as a collective place for them to understand how they can use these dollars and have some real concise guidance. These projects they range from video equipment to contracted planners, but all of these projects are selected for their documented ability to fill an identified gap. So that is part of that is the documentation that effort will serve a gap that has been identified in our community and our ability to provide those services. And as we continue our efforts to build a safer, more inclusive, resilient city, we would like to highlight a few of the initiatives we have selected in 2016 for our attention. We will continue to equip and train that rapid needs assessment team to be a huge asset to our city. That the EOP revision will be put forth to the mayor and council, like I previously mentioned. We are working to implement a tiered critical infrastructure program across the enterprise that looks at both Minneapolis-owned facilities and also collaboratively with our public-private sector cooperation to look at the critical lifeline sector assets throughout our enterprise that help us continue what we're doing. So we're looking at power and water and things like that. We'll be relaunching that continuity of planning effort for the entire enterprise, and we'll be continuing our public outreach both through that Ready Camp initiative and also by looking at how we can spread that preparedness message to the neighborhood through existing community and enterprise outreach groups. We will continue our work toward being accreditation eligible for the NFPA 1600 by 2019. We are developing a community recovery plan that includes long-term economic recovery, which is a huge concern. We continue to integrate whole community planning into all of our efforts, and that includes access and functional need populations throughout the community. We are creating a volunteer and donations management program. We're also continuing to better inform our grant dollars and make sure that we can leverage those in the best way possible. And lastly, we are continuing that training and exercise program. So for the year 2016, we already have 8 exercises and 18 courses scheduled and are supporting the PD in their training efforts, ramping up to the Super Bowl. That concludes my presentation. I'm happy to take any questions, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Councilmember Gordon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for the presentation. I did have a couple questions about some of the highlights from 2015. You mentioned the railroad corridor assessment and also a skyway infrastructure assessment, and I'm wondering if those would be available for review. Are those available online, or could council members review those? I'm particularly curious about the railroad corridor assessment.
Absolutely, Mr. Chair. Councilmember Gordon, the railroad corridor assessment was done in coordination with CPED and Property Services, and what it did is a comprehensive look at the rail corridors throughout the community, looking at vulnerable critical infrastructure and access and functional needs. Those were all inputted in the MapIt Minneapolis GIS system, so those exist as layers that would be accessible in a rail emergency, but we absolutely can get those to you for review if that's what you're looking at, and show you how to get to those to look at what's in there.
I'd appreciate that.
In collaboration with CPED, Property Services, and the Downtown Improvement District. Happy to share any data on that. It was a look at how we map out those skyway systems. It's a very complex system, as all of us know, trying to navigate them. But we're really looking at that to be able to look at a numerical numbering system and access for those systems. If you look at something like an evacuation or an emergency response, so we're still in the process of that. There's an assessment completed, which you have to look at. But we're looking at how we can improve that, especially in ramp up to the Super Bowl.
Very interesting. And I know the skyways get very complicated in the loans and when they're open, when they're closed. So if we want to utilize them, we need to know what we were doing.
Yes.
The other issue that intrigued me was a critical infrastructure program. Could you just tell me a little bit about what that is?
Yep. So we currently have a critical infrastructure program, but we're building it out to really look at assessing. We're doing a vulnerability assessment update of the current Minneapolis facilities. One was completed back in 2005. So what we're doing is working with Property Services to update that vulnerability assessment for Minneapolis-specific enterprise buildings. That is done in a comprehensive, it's a ranked structure based on risk is where we're starting. So happy to talk about that more if you wanted information. But what we're looking at is looking at a way to take threat times consequence times vulnerability and apply that to our critical infrastructure throughout the Twin City or throughout the metropolitan area. And in Minneapolis, we're looking at not just our Minneapolis-owned facilities. We have to look at the critical lifeline structures that support those facilities. So that's where we get into the power and water and all the critical lifeline sectors that support. So we're working with our private sector partners. We have there's a few different tools we have, including risk assessments that we do of those facilities that are inputted into something that's called the Infrastructure Protection Gateway, which is a federal program. It allows us to map out those critical facilities, things like that. So doing those facility assessments and finding a way to prioritize and rank where we have single points of failure across systems, working towards that.
So does that include transportation infrastructure like bridges?
Bridges aren't, I wouldn't say that's, we're starting with the primary with the power and water type supply, but yes, that's absolutely one of the critical, it's not a lifeline sector asset, but it is one of the critical infrastructure sectors that will be taken into consideration.
Thank you.
Council President Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm on these 2015 highlights. What is THIRA, the acronym?
I'm sorry. That's a threat hazard identification risk assessment.
Okay.
This is something required of an urban area security initiative. We are an urban area security initiative group, a UASI. This is required of us, and Minneapolis did our own enterprise one. This is in alignment with the national preparedness goal and the national preparedness system.
Okay. And then on the federal grant programs, I know there was What's the total budget of the emergency management division? Is a little
Don't have
over
our-
$1 million?
I don't have our total budget on hand. I apologize. I know that we manage over $1 million in grant funding.
Yes. And I will tell you, I heard some chatter this last year that we had very little spending that was allocated in those dollars to both the police department and the fire department. And I'm just wondering with this year's process, do we allocate those federal dollars every year? Okay, I think it would be helpful to have this committee get at least some flavor of what the requests are for those dollars from our city partners before decisions are made as to how to say yes or no to particular items. I think that would be of interest to us. So I'd appreciate that if it would come before the committee. And then there was another acronym on 2016 Next Steps, BIA co-op something.
Sorry, that's the Business Impact Analysis and Continuity of Operations Planning effort.
Okay.
The last time that the city engaged in a continuity effort was back in 2006. There was an update in 2009.
This is city business?
This is continuity of government and continuity of operations for the
I'm
entire.
sorry, you speak a little fast. Continuity of city operations, are we talking about?
Continuity of operations would be per every department or division, depending how they want to break it out.
In the city?
Yep. Continuity of government would be the enterprise-wide, looking from a government structure standpoint. How do we continue to provide our essential services in a time of emergency? So by collecting those divisional or departmental continuity of operations plans, we're able to kind of look across the structure and see what essential services each business line provides and where they plan to go facility-wise, what their personnel plans are and technology support plans are, should they need to leave that facility or work in a compromised environment.
And just a curiosity, this was scheduled. Where is Mr. Lane?
Director Lane is in a voting, he's required to be in a voting meeting of the Joint Powers Agreement for the metropolitan area right now. He's not able to defer his vote or allow an abstention vote, so he sent me a step.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and I was informed of that over a month ago.
Okay.
But thank you, Ms. Williams. Councilmember Palmisano.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ms. Williams, I just want to say thank you. I think it's great comfort to all of us to know that you're out there, that the Emergency Operations Center and emergency management is an active part of our city. I benefited from being able to tour the Emergency Operations Center about a month or two ago, and the day I was there, it was a big coordinated training effort with others from across the state. So I recognize that things like that are of benefit to everyone, not even just the city of Minneapolis and our resiliency. Also, you work hard to keep us accredited in all these kinds of things that, while I don't understand what they are, it's nice to know how actively we keep all of those credentials up. So just to say thank you.
Ms. Williams, I have two questions for you. First is just a clarification. The DuPont fire, can you tell me, was that the one on West Broadway, or was it some other thing that I completely missed?
No, Mr. Chair, the DuPont fire was a multi-structure fire. It had multiple, it was a 3-alarm fire, multi-level business residential structure, and OEM was able to provide some plume modeling since we had a large smoke cloud. We were looking at potential evacuations, working with the schools department actually, that there was a potential to need to evacuate a school in that area due to that smoke cloud. So we were doing some plume modeling and different information sharing surrounding that. I believe that occurred in April of last year.
Okay. Was that North Minneapolis fire, right?
I believe so.
Okay. All right. And quickly, number of FTEs you are allotted and number of FTEs you have at this point?
Mr. Chair, we currently have 6.5. I don't know off the top of my head how many were allotted, but I think it's 10, 8 or 10.
Okay.
So
all right. Thank you. Any other questions? Council President Johnson?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay. Well, Ms. Williams, thank you. Okay. Okay, and council members, I'm going to move to receive and file this. Any discussion on this? All right, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. All right. We are here at our main event, which is The contract with Taser International for purchase of body cams, equipment, and video storage solutions, and up right now is Otto Dahl. Please, Mr. Dahl.
Chairman Yang and members of the Public Safety, Civil Rights, and Emergency Management Committee, I am Otto Dahl, the Chief Information Officer for the city. I am joined today by several people from the police department. I have Deputy Chief of Staff Aaron Dondo here, as well as Deputy Chief Glampy, Lieutenant Reinhardt, and the police department's finance director, McPherson, is here as well. I also have Gary Winter from the city attorney's office that dealt with contract negotiations on this, as well as Bob Barco, who is IT's director of vendor management and contract services. Hopefully, collectively, we can answer any and all questions that you have. We've really been in this process for some time. We issued an RFP back in April of 2014 looking for a body cam solution. And you need to recognize that the solution is more than just the 587 cameras that we're seeking, but also there are things like docking stations that charge those cameras, also download the video off them, as well as various support equipment, clips and brackets and so forth for the various options that officers have to put the cameras on their person. Sort of the other side of the coin is those videos live within a storage system, electronic storage system that allows the police department to then go in and ID, find particular videos, catalog video segments, do redaction if necessary, et cetera. So there's just not only, if you will, the actual physical hardware, but there's also a lot of software involved to manage, if you will, in essence, video evidence. And that is part and parcel to this whole package. We worked with the vendors who submitted proposals, and we came up with 2 finalists that we wanted to go into demos with city police personnel, if you will, field trials. We then cut contracts with each of them to be able to do that and do extensive testing with the devices. In particular, we wanted to do it across multiple seasons, particularly doing winter, considering some of the challenges that winter presents to such technology. And we have those contracts currently in place, but they end at the end of March 2016. We ultimately chose Taser International because of a number of items. First being that they performed the best, as experienced by our testers in the police department, as well as they were the vendor was very responsive to the actual test and evaluation, going so far as even modifying some of their equipment to fit our specific needs. We really appreciate and value that flexibility, not only in their products, but also within their company. And then also, we found that they had a very predictable refresh cycle. If you think about smartphones, that camera that sits on a smartphone has really evolved a lot in its ability to have more precision in an actual photo that it takes. And so the same is true of this technology. It will be evolving over time. And so what we wanted to and what we were pleased with is Taser has a very structured product refresh cycle that really benefits us in 2 ways. One is it most definitely allows us to see the advantages as technology progresses in this area, as well as it allows the city to have a very structured capital expense budgeting philosophy going forward in the outcoming years. We, and I would say the last item that struck us with the TASER Ultimate Proposal and Performance was we also have some experience with that vendor today as we use some of their products in the police department. And so the combination of all those led to a selection of TASER International as our vendor. Now, contractually, as pointed out, within the RCA, we did have to make 2 adjustments to our standard contracting arrangement between the city and TASER. The first deals with the city's standard unlimited liability clause that we have. And that got capped, or we're asking for that to be capped at $5 million annually for this particular project and equipment and service delivery. This is not unusual. We run into this a lot, most definitely within the IT realm. We see a lot of this where vendors are not willing to, take on unlimited liability and then price their products out. Second, we had to make it clear that the video that we put in there in storage is the city's data itself. And so any liability that comes out of the actual use of that information is the city's and not the vendors. And that's quite appropriate. So those were the 2 contractual differences from our standard operating contract language that we make use of. And with the Chairman's permission, I'd like to bring up Robin McPherson to talk about the funding and of this project and the costs that are going to be associated with it. Okay.
Mr. Chair, council members, thank you very much for the opportunity to present the contract. I'd also like to reiterate that this has very much been a group project, and we really have very thankful that we've been able to use IT services, city finance, and the city attorney's office. We have all been involved in the negotiation with TASER, and I think the group aspect of it has really helped significantly. I think a form has been distributed that gives the costs going for the next 5 years, and I'd like to just briefly go over those costs. From a program standpoint, for the 5-year program itself, we're looking at an estimated cost of $6.4 million. Of that $6.4 million, $3.3 million is part of the TASER contract. And if you look at it by year, the first year we're at $1,644,242, and that includes both one-time costs of $700,000 and then ongoing costs in the bottom of that first column. That totals for $1.6 million for 2016. Our budgeted appropriation for 2016 was $1.8 million for the body camera. So we're under budget, estimated under budget for 2016. Going forward, the cost per year is approximately $1.2 million. That includes storage and the other costs that are listed there, including 2 FTEs. And we were projecting estimated costs for those years of $1.2 million. So pretty close during the budget process. I don't know if you have any specific questions about these, but one thing I would like to point out regarding the contract itself, one of the things that we spent quite a bit of time discussing is termination ability of the contract. And I guess I would like to just point out that we do have a termination agreement within the contract that gives us the ability to terminate for legislative, appropriation, budget, pretty much any reason with 90 days notice. So we're very happy that we were able to put that in. The other incident that we were able to put in is after the second year, we're actually able to reduce or increase the amount of storage that we might need with no penalty. So that allows us, if there's legislative changes of any kind, we can make adjustments accordingly. If we find that we're not using as much storage, since we have most of the individuals on unlimited storage, we can reduce that and thereby reduce our costs as well. So,
Councilman Borden.
Yeah, and I wonder if you might want to put the little spreadsheet on the overhead so people could see it here in the room.
Challenge.
Just set it down and we'll take care of it for you.
There we go.
Nicely done.
Thank you. That's the sum total of my engineering.
And I'm just curious because it seems like some of the ongoing expenses especially are ongoing expenses. And so I'm trying to figure out what's going to TASER and what are other expenses. And it looks like maybe the software is something that we're giving to TASER or paying for to TASER, and the rest of it is our other expenses.
Mr. Chair, Mr. Councilmember, yeah, that is absolutely correct. The software is really the storage, and the rest is in other costs. So.
All right, so that's helpful to see
Yeah.
that.
And if you look at on the far right-hand column, if you add up all the ones, that's actually what's going to TASER in total. So the summation of the ones on the far right column is the total of the TASER contract for $3.3 million.
On the top line,
The far right column.
everything going down?
Yeah, if you look at there's a 1 next to to 3 items on the
Yes,
far right.
Yes, I see what you're saying. I appreciate that.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there was a 1.2 million that was thrown around up here for a while for the cameras, and that was supposed to cover the costs. Maybe you could just clarify for those who've asked us about it, and for us who are here right now, the 1.2, what that refers to, and then some of the extra.
Sure. Actually, the $1.2 million was for ongoing costs after the cameras were purchased. So that's for costs in year 2 through 5. That does not include the price of the cameras themselves.
And I also noticed in the staff report, it talked about that we were purchasing, I think it was 300 of those, we used to call them tasers, but I guess we can't call them tasers, the electronic shocking devices. Is that right? It's close, right?
There's an acronym, and I'm yes, you're right.
And so where does that appear is that under other equipment?
That's, yes, council members, that is actually part of the software line item. It's all bundled. This